This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gitu-Yuat. It's Monday, February 17th. This is Africa 54. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo hails Senegal as an anchor of democracy in West Africa. In Zimbabwe, an American non-governmental organization installs solar panels in maternity wards. And why is polygamy still common in some African communities despite a worldwide decline? We'll have those stories in a moment. But first, officials in Burkina Faso say more than a dozen gunmen opened fire in a village in the northern region Sunday, killing 24 people and wounding at least 10. Authorities say they believe a religious leader was the target of the attack in Pansy, Yagha province. Colonel Salfo Kabore said in a statement to the French news agency AFP that armed terrorists stormed into Pansy and attacked the peaceful local population after having identified them and separated them from non-residents. Now, U.S.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his wife Susan Pompeo arrived.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is in Africa, where he has made stops in Senegal and Angola and will later travel to Ethiopia. VOA's Cindy Sain is traveling with Pompeo and has tonight's report.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his wife Susan Pompeo arrived to a very warm welcome in Senegal. One of the events they went to was a meeting with young entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs who showed their beautiful clothing and purses and other products. The secretary asked them how far along their businesses were, and he also had official talks with joint partnerships and talking about security with Senegalese leaders, with them expressing concern about increasing terrorism.
Senegal should know that collectively, Senegalese forces in the region, European partners, French, and the United States of America, we have an obligation to get security right here in the region. It's what will permit economic growth, and we're determined to do that. And I'm convinced that when our review is done, we'll have a conversation with not just Senegal, but all the countries in the region. We'll talk through why we're doing, how we're doing it. We'll deliver an outcome that works for all of us.
For his part, the Senegalese Foreign Minister, Amadou Ba, also said that they really want the U.S. to remain engaged in Africa. That's of critical importance.
We talked about the U.S. presence in the region, and we wish for them to stay, for them to continue helping with security. We want the Americans to continue to help us with training and information.
After Senegal, Secretary Pompeo went to Angola, where he praised President Lourenço for his fight against corruption and said that the U.S. wanted to assist Angola.
We talked first about moving beyond the corruption that stunted this nation's vast potential for far too long. During his first 2.5 years in office, President Lourenço has done great work to make it a ghost of the past. He's increased transparency. He's helped financial institutions clean up their books, and he's pursued bad actors. I'm optimistic that he will continue to liberate Angola from corruption.
At a joint press availability, Secretary Pompeo was asked about U.S. and China competing in Angola and elsewhere, and he was asked to compare the two models. And he said, well, he would leave that to others. But he said, I can tell you when American companies come into a country, they bring jobs.
You can see that our investments are transparent, they're clean. We don't impose debt burdens that nations can't resolve.
From here, Secretary of State Pompeo will be traveling on to Ethiopia and then to Saudi Arabia and Oman on a long 9-day tour. So from Luanda, this is Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Foreign ministers and top government officials gathered Sunday in Germany in another effort to bring peace to Libya. The meeting of the International Follow-up Committee of the Berlin Conference on Libya took place on the sidelines of Munich Security Conference as Germany and the UN attempt to draft a plan for cutting off outside military aid and for the warring parties. As EU foreign ministers discuss peace efforts on Monday, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the agreement on an arms embargo and ceasefire reached in January in Berlin is constantly violated. Now, Chinese officials, health officials are reporting Monday that the number of overall confirmed cases of the coronavirus has reached an astonishing 70,000, with the death toll rising to nearly 1,800 cases. The number of suspected new cases now exceeds 8,000. In China's Hubei province Monday, the epicenter of the outbreak, authorities reported 100 more deaths. Meanwhile, in Egypt, officials are confirming its first case of the virus. Here's VOA's Latzahok.
At least 46 American citizens tested positive for coronavirus on the Diamond Princess cruise ship, which has been docked in Japan's Yokohama port since February 5th, with hundreds of infected passengers. The American travelers will have to be treated in Japan before they can return home. Chinese officials said Sunday that more than 9,500 people were cured and discharged from hospitals, and that a number of critically ill people has dropped in February.
Among confirmed cases, critical cases in other provinces in the country was 15.9% at the peak on January 27th and dropped to 7.2% on February 15th. This change shows that the prevention and control on virus is going into effect.
Preventative measures include a tougher control of meat markets to ensure there are no illegal sales of meat or wildlife, and encouraging people to telecommute. The city of Wuhan in Hubei province, where the virus is believed to have originated, has been virtually isolated. Still, the virus continues to spread. Egypt's health ministry on Friday announced the first confirmed case of the novel coronavirus in Africa. Communities around the world are on alert. The Ministry of Health in the Palestinian territory of Gaza has prepared a medical center at the Rafah crossing to test and, if necessary, treat travelers from abroad.
We are now in a quarantine zone that has been prepared to deal with arrivals from China from the moment they leave from China until the end of 14 days, which is supposed to be the incubation period, and thus will be hosted in equipped rooms.
The issue of global threat posed by coronavirus was raised at a security conference in the German city of Munich on Saturday.
The world spends billions of dollars preparing for a terrorist attack, but relatively little preparing for the attack of a virus, which could be far more deadly and far more damaging economically, politically, and socially.
Religious leaders around the world, including in Russia and Israel, have led people in prayer for the end of the virus. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
A U.S.-funded charity is installing solar panels to provide electricity to the maternity wards of rural hospitals in Zimbabwe. The move should come as a relief to new and expecting mothers. Columbus Mavunga reports.
Beatrice Government Hospital is one of more than 200 institutions in Zimbabwe where a UN charity known as We Care Solar has installed solar power in labor and maternity wards. This 18-year-old delivered her son Rodney under the solar-powered lights Tuesday night this week. Two of her sisters delivered when there was no solar energy.
We are really happy. This is a real relief. We now have solar lights, which are handy when there's no electricity. Our children and those in the labor ward will no longer be in darkness. It was really difficult without solar energy because doctors struggled to help expecting mothers. Delivered babies would cry in the dark. It was difficult to change nappies in the dark.
Zimbabwe is dealing with massive power outages that can go for 18 hours a day. Sometimes the electricity is off for days because of recurring droughts and dilapidated power generating equipment. President Emerson Mnangagwa's government says it is aware of the difficulties that expecting mothers and health personnel experience due to these power cuts.
You know, mothers at times were requested to bring candles like you are hearing, but now there will be lights permanently. They will be able to deliver. If mothers who have, say, tears in the perineum, they can be sutured very easily. Even mothers who were failing to come here now, fearing there's no light, there's now light everywhere. They will be very happy to come. We are very happy with it.
Dr. Laura Stachel is co-founder and executive director of We Care Solar. She says her organization aims to install solar energy at more than 1,000 health institutions and maternity and labor wards in Zimbabwe.
I think this project is going to have great impact because it means that health workers are no longer going to struggle by candlelight or by holding cell phones in their mouth. And I think Zimbabwe is going to be a world leader. It's going to show the world that it's possible to reach every health center with reliable electricity. And we no longer have an excuse to leave people in the dark when we have a sustainable technology like solar that's simple, reliable, easy to use, and affordable.
Stachel says her organization has done similar projects in Liberia, Uganda, and Nigeria. The physician says in Nigeria, maternal deaths fell by 70% at hospitals that received solar panels. That should be great news to Zimbabweans if that trend happens in their country too. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Beatrice, Zimbabwe.
As more African societies move toward monogamy, family law experts say those who choose polygamy often lack the support and structures they need. For many in polygamous families today, the cultural landscape has shifted. VOA's Jesusemen Ani has more.
Life is no cakewalk for Jason Asina Gutu as he labors to meet the needs of his 2 wives and kids.
I lead a struggling life. I go for manual work out there, splitting firewood, clearing sewer lines. I carry luggage for a few coins just to provide for my family.
The Kenyan father of 7 juggles his time and resources between his family in the countryside and the other in Nairobi. He regrets not having the money to send his older son to university.
Having 2 families or 2 homesteads, people say the individual is capable. But the truth is, he is not managing. It is something that happened without one knowing. You can go somewhere and find someone you can't let go. You made a mistake, and you got yourself into it.
While the number of men taking multiple wives has declined worldwide, polygamous unions remain common in many African societies.
It maintains its popularity in rural areas for the most part, but as Africa becomes a more urbanized society, there's a greater shift toward monogamy in those cities. And that may be largely for economic reasons, that it's more expensive to maintain a large household in a city than it is in a village.
Polygamy has long been a part of traditional or religious customs, predominantly in patriarchies across the continent. In the past, more wives meant more hands for labor, and the number of children that the household had was seen as a strength, says Kenyan family lawyer Judith Wangori.
There was distribution not only of time, of attention, but also even resources that was managed by the customs, by the norms. But also, the girls were brought up to expect that polygamy could happen. The men were also brought up to take in the responsibility that if they choose polygamy, then there are certain responsibilities that go with them.
But with the global rise of monogamy as the dominant marriage institution, the cultural landscape has shifted, raising challenges for those who choose plural marriages today.
People have been brought up with a sense of monogamy in them. They want to own, they want to possess the husband. And then they come into a situation where they probably have to share him with the first family. It's difficult.
Critics say the practice leaves women vulnerable to abuse, neglect, poverty, and household conflict, and can deprive women and children of their marital and inheritance rights. Laws on polygamy vary across Africa, but advocates say legal protection is increasingly more necessary to protect the women and children involved in polygamous unions. Jesusemen Ani, VOA News.
And we'll be right back.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. In the courtyard of his house in Bobo Dioulasso, Burkina Faso, Sheikh Ahmed Al Hassan Sanu, who goes by Iron Baby in competition, is preparing for his next record. In April 2019, Iron Baby won the log lifting world title, setting his own personal record at 220 kilograms, 8 kilograms short of the current world record. His next attempt will be at the World Log Lift Challenge in Leeds on April 6th. The 27-year-old, who weighs 187 kilograms, eats 8 chickens a day for protein intake when he's preparing for a competition. He's the first Burkinabe to get his name in the Guinness Book of World Records. He lifted a person weighing 60 kilograms, 69 times in just 1 minute in 2018. The next year, he broke his own record. Next up, pubs have been closing their doors in large numbers across Britain in recent years, with property prices, taxes, and a decline in drinking among the young all contributing to the trend. But some pubs, like Ye Old Cross in Yorkshire, are reinventing themselves, becoming community-owned social hubs which offer new services. After months of campaigning, pub regulars raised some £150,000 from more than 300 local people who became shareholders. Now customers can combine drinking with crafting and yoga. And finally, online fitness classes are becoming a new trend in Beijing as the coronavirus outbreak continues across the country, forcing Chinese authorities to heavily limit public activities, including access to local city gyms. Zhang Weia, a fitness trainer who owns a gym in northeastern Beijing, says her business has suffered since she was left with zero income when Beijing local sports bureaus shut down the gyms in the city last month. So she started an online workout for her clients. The enforced shutdown started during the Lunar New Year, usually the busiest time for most service businesses, and according to most economists, will accelerate an already noticeable downturn before the outbreak. And that's what's trending today.
In other world news, U.S. presidential hopefuls head to Nevada as early voting began Sunday in America's next Democratic nominating contest. Voters are selecting who should face Republican President Donald Trump in November's national election. VOA's Arasha Basadi looks ahead to the third phase of the U.S. 2020 election cycle.
Saturday, presidential hopeful Senator Bernie Sanders made a campaign stop in Texas on his way to Nevada, the site of the next Democratic caucus on February 22nd.
Black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay or straight, we are all Americans. We're going to stand together. We're going to beat Trump. We're going to transform this country.
Sanders and South Bend, Indiana's Mayor Pete Buttigieg are coming off strong performances in nomination contests in Iowa and New Hampshire.
I am running for president because I am afraid that our country is running out of time, but I believe it is not too late for us to come together. That we have a future where we will overcome our divisions if we are willing to galvanize, not polarize, an American majority demanding a better future.
Senator Amy Klobuchar started as a long shot for the nomination, but she finished third in last week's New Hampshire primary. Klobuchar says her campaign since raised $12 million.
Most of it just from regular people who have discovered me for the first time and get what I'm focused on, which is bringing people with me instead of shutting them out, which is bringing back decency to the White House. And most importantly, having a president that can actually put herself in the shoes of other people in this country, given my background, compared to Donald Trump's.
Once deemed a front-runner, former Vice President Joe Biden is seeking to have a stronger showing in Nevada and later this month in South Carolina after weak performances in Iowa and New Hampshire. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
Staying on U.S. election, the 2020 battle for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination is off to a fast but uncertain start, with strong showings in the first two contests by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Sanders, a progressive candidate, is getting a strong challenge from several moderate contenders in what experts believe could be a long race that could go all the way to the party's nominating convention in July. Here's VOA's national correspondent, Jim Malone.
In the wake of the New Hampshire primary, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is riding high.
This victory here is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump.
Sanders relied on committed progressive voters like Pat Delzell.
Bernie Sanders is in my heart and in my soul. He speaks to me like no other candidate does.
Pete Buttigieg and Senator Amy Klobuchar followed behind Sanders in the New Hampshire results, appealing to moderates like Seth Window.
I'm really just looking for someone to have the momentum the energy to go up against Trump. And I feel like Amy Klobuchar captured that in the debate.
That split between progressives and moderates will play out in the Democratic contests to come, says Julie Pace.
Klobuchar and Buttigieg are both moderates, and it suggests that there is a large percentage of the electorate, at least in New Hampshire, who was interested in a candidate that is more moderate.
Former New York City mayor and billionaire Michael Bloomberg has been climbing in the polls, thanks largely to TV ads, and is set to be a contender in primaries next month.
I'm the one that can beat Donald Trump, and I think the most important thing for this country is to change the resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
But Sanders is already pushing back on Bloomberg and his wealth.
At this point in the campaign, we are taking on billionaires, and we're taking on candidates funded by billionaires.
Sanders and Buttigieg have done well in the early contests, but the overall picture for Democrats remains uncertain. Jim Kessler is with the center-left Democratic group Third Way.
Muddled, for sure. I think this is a race that's going to stay open for a number of weeks, at least through Super Tuesday.
A total of 14 states will hold contests on Super Tuesday, March 3rd. But the race could go on much longer, says Alan Lichtman.
It's possible we could see a long contest that's splintered, with various candidates winning various primaries and nobody coming into the convention with a commanding lead. Then we may see something we haven't seen in over half a century, a brokered convention where the delegates actually pick the candidate, and then anything can happen.
For now, though, the Democratic field is focused on the next two contests later this month, the Nevada caucuses and the South Carolina primary. Jim Malone, VOA News, Washington.
It's time for a Monday Sports Update, and joining us now is Sandy Shomari with a report on the importance of African players in the NBA. Hello, Sandy.
Hello, Esther, and thanks for the weekend. Esther, the NBA 7th Africa Luncheon was held in Chicago over the weekend, and NBA Commissioner Adam Silver spoke to reporters on the importance of African players in this league.
We launched NBA Africa with our office in Johannesburg, but actually our involvement in Africa began before then. Of course, in 1984, Hakeem Olajuwon was drafted into the NBA, and to me that began the modern era of African players in the NBA. And then jump ahead now to 2020, And we have 40 players in the NBA who were either born in Africa or are first-generation Africans. So that's quite incredible.
The 12 teams came through a tough competition from 29 champions in Africa. The International Basketball Federation FIBA General Secretary Andreas Zeglis highlighted the importance of developing more African players and young talent.
We had 29 countries, 29 champions of national leagues participating, fighting for a spot among the 12 of the BAL. This is a multiplying factor. This is what really brings development of the sport in Africa. And of course, the balance between developing more African players and of course bringing young talent from outside to have a high-quality league is very important.
Amadou Gallo-Fall, the NBA Vice President and Managing Director for Africa, pointed out that it was time to create a more predictable path towards getting talent from Africa.
Today, I am extremely proud to announce the 12 teams that have qualified to take part in this inaugural season of the Basketball Africa League.
The 12 teams that have qualified for the inaugural season of Africa Basketball League are Sportif de Petrolier, Algeria, Petro de Luanda, Angola, Fos Ahmed et Police, Cameroon, Zamalek of Egypt, Gendarmerie Nationale Basketball Club of Madagascar, AS Police Mali, AS Saleh Morocco, Ferroviario de Maputo, Mozambique, Rivers Hoopers BC Nigeria, Patriots BC Rwanda, AS Douane Senegal, and Union Sportive Monastirienne of Tunisia. Former NBA player Didier Mbenga said this is a great opportunity for Africa and it's time for the continent to have its own league and develop its own talent.
It's a big blessing for us as an African player because we always want to have our league. And this African League is going to be great because we have so much talent. Everybody can come to the league, everybody can come to Europe. So we're going to have our league develop a player over there like we always do. So which this league is going to be really great because it's going to not just basketball, also being on business-wise, give the people jobs, opportunity, expose some country in the world, some players, some culture. That's why it's very important for us.
The competition will commence on March 13 this year in Dakar, Senegal. And meanwhile, the two-time NBA All-Star Luol Deng has been named Basketball Africa League BL Global Ambassador. And that wraps our sports for today. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you, Sunday. We'll see you again on Monday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website. From all of us here, good night.